you have to focus, right? And so I dropped a lot of information about a lot of different verticals, but at the end of the day, don't try to attack everything and it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like pick one or two that you want to go after and focus and master those and become, extremely dialed in those verticals, because that's really where the true benefit lies. So focus, 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 and man, I'll see y'all at the top.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today we got Noble Crawford in the lab with us. We are just talking about offline that, well overdue. It's been about 2 years. I've been chasing this man. He's an important man. And so, but at the same time, we're always rubbing shoulders with each other's networks. So I'm like, let me get this man in the lab with us because he's a practitioner who not only talks the talk, he's walking the damn walk. Like you're doing some really interesting things and very, very unique things. But before, I give you the lengthy introduction, I mean, I want to ask how you introduce yourself now, because you've been in this space of, I would say, serial entrepreneur. I mean, being business owner, commission salesperson in different industries, right? You work with the biggest brands like Marriott, Hilton, ISG. You're a principal partner now. You have a marketing background as well. And you didn't just get into this like, some of the folks, because there is some truth to this. And Avery Call said this. I was talking to her this weekend. She's like, you want to learn from people who aren't just riding this high of like 2020 and up. Like you started this, if I'm correct, since 2017. So you have like, you're not just riding the high of like the COVID times. You've also seen before what it looked like. And I think that's very important as well in this industry for us to really, to have a seasoned guy like yourself. So when I meet with you, let's say I meet you at the airport and I say, hey, what do you do for a living? What's that answer that you would tell me if you and I are just networking casually as like an elevator, like elevator pitch, my man? What do you say? Like, you're so seasoned.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, Ruben, man, hey, I appreciate you having me on, man. Super excited, been looking forward to this. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I depending on who I'm talking to, right, I might mix it up. So I might let
Yeah.
people know that I, own several businesses. If I'm coming in with a kind of a vague answer, but if it's specific to like the short-term rental space or something like that, then I
Yeah.
let them know I'm the co-founder of a hospitality brand, and we specialize in furnished accommodations across a number of different verticals. And then that usually piques their interest and they're like, okay, well, what exactly is that? Right. And so then we'll kind of dive in at that point.
Furnished accommodations across multiple verticals. Guys, I'm taking notes. If you guys aren't, I'm taking notes already because how you speak is very key. So that's okay. So I talked about like your different background, right? Like tech, high education, it helps like corp. Tell us about how you see, because when you say furnished across multiple vertical integrations, okay, let's talk about that. Like what is the business model? What is your USP? And I know one of them is government contracts. That's what you're known for too. So, and but we're gonna like unwrap that because I don't even know what that means, right? When you say that, right? So
Okay.
what is your USP that you bring to the marketplace, your unique selling point that you feel is like, okay, this is why we're gaining traction and maybe above the marketplace maybe.
Right. Got it. So essentially, our business model is focused on, unlike someone like Mark Simpson, everybody knows Mark, great guy, excellent. His business model is business to consumer, right? So going business straight to the guest, how to get that direct booking guest. Our business model is more business to business, right? So when I talk about, kind of doubling down on different verticals, we're talking about corporate, we're talking about higher education, we're talking about government, federal, military, so direct booking verticals, but going business to business so that your entity is set up to do business with organizations and companies directly.
Oh, that's a great explanation. So why don't we go actually there? I love how you kind of siloed those out. If we go to education, what is it like universities? Like who and what in education? Like, let's go through these examples that you might be talking to. And I'm getting the sense that this is like the gatekeeper that gives you the opportunity, that has the people that you're interested. They already have that audience and you're tapping on their door, and it's like, hey, let's do a B2B here because I could serve your people. But who are those people and what organizations?
Yeah, excellent question. So traditionally, most people think I'm talking about student housing when I say higher education, but that's in
Right.
fact,
That could have been one, right? But yeah, but
but that's not necessarily the case, right? So really talking about working with faculty and staff. So there's tenured and visiting faculty that may be coming to the university for either an academic semester or an entire academic school year, but they don't live there locally, right? So that can be very common. Postdoctoral candidates, research assistants, graduate level, and students and things like that. One of the sweet spots that we kind of doubled down on during COVID was in fact students, but it wasn't the traditional student that you would think, right? So what we found ourselves doing was, as we all know, during COVID, everything started shutting down. And so at some point, the college dormitories and university dorms started to shut down, and they were having the students go back home and leave. Well, there was one specific student type that was in trouble, and that was the international student. Okay.
I was hoping you were going to say that. That makes sense.
Yeah,
they couldn't go home.
They couldn't fly back home. And then they had to leave the dorm. So what we did in the cities where we had units near colleges and universities, we went to those universities' housing departments. We said, hey, we want to house those international students. Now, as good fortune would have it, what we tended to kind of gravitate towards it is, ironically enough, was a specific demographic, and that was Asian females, right? And so what we found 100%. That was Asian females traveling to the U.S. for school, they had friends, right? And so when we got a couple of them, then word of mouth would get out. And so what we had was we were sitting on in different locations, 3 and 4 bedroom townhome units that we would traditionally rent out the entire unit. So then we just started breaking that down into per door. Right. So then we're getting, So then our revenue shot up exponentially. So we were doing a good service to the community, helping out these international students who were stuck, couldn't travel back home. Right. And either their parents had funds to pay, or they were involved in some type of, organization or private funding where that could pay as well. Right. For their stay. And so we took multiple doors and we doubled down on that international student model during COVID, and it just works.
So I heard you say the keyword was housing departments, right? Which then led to the international students. And it sounds like it trickled down to now almost like a hybrid of a B2B and B2C as well. Because now let me ask you, when a student would tell their friend, are they reaching out to their local housing department, to their school, or they're reaching out to you directly?
Yeah, great question. So when we initially set it up, we set it up with the housing departments directly, right? And so we said we want to be the off-campus referral for those students who are kind of displaced right now, don't have anywhere to go, right? And so, so some of those female students that had friends on campus, they naturally said, hey, I've got friends. We took those on directly. Because there was
they have your contact information and everything, right? You're the one who's getting. Yep. Oh, so you're also still benefiting from getting obviously their contact information. You're not even going through the school for that, or the housing department?
No,
it's kind of
because we were off campus, and the housing department was just referring us as an off-campus option, because there was a real challenge, especially in some cities and universities, where really the only available space were hotel and motel spaces, and even they were shutting down, if you can recall, during the pandemic, right? So so we were a very niche option for a lot of these international students who were stuck.
Man, that's so good. So, have you heard of the book Dream 100 by Dana Derricks?
I'm not.
It's a marketing book. Okay, it's a good book. I'll send you. You could find it on Amazon. It'll be more expensive. He wants you to go to this funnel. He's a marketer. You get it.
Okay.
But the reason why I love what you're doing is it's about the Dream 100 concept is a Russell Brunson adopted concept, right? And I'm sure you know my guy Russell Brunson. And so the idea is that a lot of people focus on I gotta focus on the consumer. I gotta focus on the consumer, B2C, B2C, B2C. But what Dream 100 approach says, if you spend all your energy on actually connecting with the gatekeepers that already has the attention of your audience, you're going to, once you get that person, because it's brand association, like the students already trust the school, right? So it's the housing department. What, how am I not going to trust the housing department that's giving me a referral? So that should be the focus for us as marketers, right? And he even talks about how it took him 10 years to get in front of oh my gosh, what's the big guy's name? We all know him, public speaker.
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, thank you. Tony Robbins, right? 10 years. And then he did a collaboration with him. And if you know about anything about Tony Robbins following, people follow, live and breathe, like that's them. And then they did a brand association. So now he's tapping into Tony Robbins' audience instead of trying to get them directly through Facebook ads. He did the relationship with Tony, and then the referrals come of like, oh, like I'm at Russell, of course, let's do a collaboration together. So when I hear you, you don't need to read the damn book because you did the damn thing. But no, it's a great book. But that's where my mind goes to, right? You're going to the B2B, they have control. That's fascinating. So that's really fascinating. So thank you for the housing. Let's go into that next sector. You talked about a few verticals, right? That was the housing. What is the another one that is a part? What is another silo that you want to cover?
Sure. So we can run down a couple. I think
I want to. Okay. Please do.
So I'll rattle off a couple of them. I think one thing that is a term that people throw around pretty loosely now is corporate housing, right? And so corporate housing, the traditional corporate housing model is so there's two sides of the coin. So on one side, corporate housing companies, and this corporate housing goes back, eons, right? Corporate housing companies, they would go out and find the tenant, right, for a multifamily community, for example, right? And the prospective tenant would still have to qualify based on that multifamily community's qualification requirements, right? So they still have to make, 3.5 times the rent. They still have to do a credit background check, all of that good stuff, right? But where the corporate housing company made their money was in the furniture and having it furnished property. And typically the delta between the rent and what they would charge for the furnishings would be anywhere from $750 to $1,000, as high as $1,200 to $1,500 a month extra on top of the rent. And so the corporate housing company was putting the furniture in the unit. They're telling the multifamily community, hey, we'll go out and find your ideal tenant. We'll send them your way so they can get approved, and we're going to furnish the unit, and we're going to charge them X amount of dollars, and we're going to pay you out the rent amount, right? And so that's kind of traditional corporate housing, right? Now, the other side of corporate housing is from the company's perspective, right? So if a company like, if a construction company, for example, so, they have a bunch of a crew or a bunch of workers and construction workers in a location, they're going to be there for an extended amount of time, and they'll go get a block of, 10, 15 doors or whatever it is, and only their employees will be staying at that property, right? So that's traditional kind of corporate housing model from both sides of the coin. So nowadays in this space, people will talk about, I want to do corporate housing, but what they're saying is I'm going to do, I'm going to go find some people off of Airbnb, and I'm going to try to get a corporate, quote unquote, corporate lease, and I'm doing corporate housing. That's actually not the case. And so part of what we decided to do in the corporate space was really kind of a in-between model of traditional corporate housing and the company going in and bringing their employees, right? And so again, with B2B, we were focused on that business traveler, right? So we were very specific when we were talking to communities about who we were looking to host. It's not a traditional corporate housing where we're bringing in a tenant and you're going to background check them and credit check them, but it's also, we're not a company where we're putting our own employees in there, right? We're going to fall in the middle where we're working with companies directly, and we're going to house their traveling employees. And so for the corporate housing, there's a lot of ways to go. One of them is travel based, right? So how do you get into that? Well, I'll give you a couple of resources. The Convention and Visitors Bureau is a wealth of leads, specific in the events industry, right?
One more time.
Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Convention and Visitors
Yeah,
Bureau.
so most cities have a convention and visitors bureau or something very similar that deals with the events and conference side of activities happening in that location. MPI, which is Meeting Professionals International, that is the single largest association of meeting professionals in the world, right? So kind of getting connected through that organization is a gold mine in and of itself. Another one people don't realize, the American Express Global Business Travel Network. So they have what's called a supplier partner network, and you can position your brand to capitalize on those business travelers in that market through that supplier partner network. And so those are kind of the avenues that we approach to attract the corporate traveler, right? But we're not doing traditional corporate housing. And so that's a kind of a B2B play where we're trying to work directly with corporations. Another one is going to be I won't drag out the healthcare because a lot of people are doing that. It's become very popular lately. I mean, we all know the play. During COVID, everybody and their mom was doing travel nursing and things, and for good reason, because it was lucrative, especially during that time frame. And then there's some friends of mine. I'm not sure if you heard of Jesse Vasquez, but some friends of mine in the space.
Guys.
Yeah, so he kind of coined the whole agency play, and he has a training program on that. But all of that stuff works on the healthcare side. Now, how we got into healthcare was a little bit different. We got into healthcare working with medical schools, right? And so medical schools, and so typically when the students are at that level, they're no longer under the traditional traditional college, 4-year college system, and they're responsible for their own accommodations. They're responsible for their own housing, right? And so but they can still get they still qualify for loan money, right, for tuition and for housing. Well, a lot of STR operators don't realize that. I'm trying to think of the term. What is it when somebody gets financial aid?
Yeah,
when somebody qualifies for financial aid, and there's a off-campus housing, kind of a stipend, if you will, as part of that financial aid, the STR owner operator can get that payment instead of traditional dorms. And so how we got into healthcare was working with the medical school initially, and then going direct with hospitals. So that's an avenue too. I also talk about federal military government. We can circle back around to that. The relocation space is huge, right?
Our friend Rachel Gainsborough is doing very well in that space.
Absolutely. And so attaching yourselves to so insurance, like you talked about, what Rachel's doing primarily, but also the relocation space where you're attaching yourselves with relocation specialists, right? And so real estate agents that carry, and I can't remember the acronym after their name, but they carry this relocation specialist designation, right? And so, we were able to land a very lucrative opportunity partnering with a relocation specialist. And as I'm sure over the past couple of years, a lot of companies migrated from California to Texas, like moved their entire headquarters, right?
Southeast.
So one of those was a financial services company that migrated to Texas. And over that 18-month time of them moving their entire workforce to Texas, we were able to partner with a relocation specialist and accommodate a number of those families that were relocating. So extremely lucrative. And then, like you mentioned, insurance and disaster relief. Very, very lucrative, working with insurance housing providers, so what Rachel talks about, ALE, the big kind of brand in the space. What people don't realize is there are a lot of regional and smaller companies that provide the exact same service. And it really gets down to developing the relationships in any of these verticals, developing the relationships with those types of agencies, and becoming the point person and the go-to person in your region for those, for those displaced homeowners and things like that. And then we could get into like FEMA and disaster release and stuff like that. But those are the verticals that we primarily cover in the direct booking space.
Okay, so that was a mouthful, but in a great way, because that's the kind of intel that Experimentation is looking for, and I appreciate you sharing that, man. This is super. The next question I would have then tactically would be, we talked about some, and it's interesting because let me take a step back before I even go there. Is when you started speaking about all these different verticals, I keep on thinking. I recently read the book Who Not How, right? So the next thing that I'm thinking of, okay, how does this look like tactically, right? Because you said developing a relationship, and when you come to these conferences, I'm here in San Diego right now, and a Bigger Pockets conference, which was amazing, and it's like, you guys got to network, right? And for me, networking comes, and as a marketer too, and it comes pretty naturally, I guess. There's just reaching out to people a specific way. I use a lot of video, actually. That's what gets me through the doors. I use like vidyard.com, the Chrome extension. I'll be like, hey, Ruben here, such and such and such. I have a Calendly link. Would love to talk, book a call, etc. Right? What does that look like for you when you're maybe reaching out to in HR? I don't know if you mentioned doing that, or it sounds like you're going for more specific departments. Are you Googling the name? I mean, look, we can be as resourceful as possible, but we'd just like to hear a few examples of what that looks like to develop a relationship. Are you doing like a drip campaign? Are you calling periodically? Hey, it's Noble again. Just, wanted to just reach out, you got anything, right? What does that look like actually? Because we use that word sometimes, develop a relationship and offer value and network. But I genuinely believe that we sometimes don't even explain. We're so jaded for us, especially you with all your years of experience, that might come off as second nature. But what does it look like for someone who's listening, wants to break into that? What does that actually look like tactically?
Yeah, got it. Great question. Great question. So I think you hit on a couple of key terms. One of them being value add, right? And so, yes, the networking is one aspect of it. Getting in front of people, being in the room, that proximity effect, right? Extremely important, right? Because in a lot of times in business, it's who or it's the connection that you've made, right? And it's developing and building that relationship with them. But from a tactical perspective, so I teach my students a method. I call it kind of LinkedIn tracing is what I call it. And so from a tactical perspective, so I typically teach them to start with LinkedIn, right? Because as we know, that's kind of the B2B social platform, if you will, right? And you can learn a lot about a person through LinkedIn and kind of position kind of where you're going to start to figure out how you can add value to them, right? So I'll give you an example in the federal space. Regardless of whatever vertical we're working with, we try to figure out how can we add value to the person. But first, we have to find out who is this person? Who's the decision maker, right? So we have to find that out first. So there's some prospecting and sales involved in this, right? And so finding out who the decision maker is involves us doing some LinkedIn tracing, where we'll go by and we'll find out, based on specific job titles, locations, departments they work in. We'll kind of backdoor, like you said, through HR or through purchase and procurement is one department that we'll go through. But then once we get them on the phone or sending them off an email, we have to, first of all, they don't know we exist. So we have to introduce ourselves and let them know who we are, the product or service that we have, and then let them know, what we offer in terms of what their needs are, right? So what the people that we connect with are the people that are traditionally looking for furnished accommodations for either a short term or an extended term for their organization, for their employees, for their contractors, that type of thing. And so because we know that, and we know that our product or service as a short-term rental operator is traditionally going to be a superior product than a hotel or a motel or an extended stay property, that's the value that we bring. Right. So then we're positioning the value of our product service in comparison to what their company is used to utilizing for those furnished accommodations for their people. Right. And so we'll come into the conversation, and let's just say that we're dealing with, a Fortune 500 company. And, we know that, and I'm getting a little bit into the government space here, but we know this Fortune 500 company has a government contract, right? Now, traditionally, what happens is when a Fortune 500 company lands a government contract, they're going to, if it requires any type of travel or anything like that, they're going to contact the nearest hotel close to where those people are going to be, and they're going to try to do, a multi-month rate, a specialized rate, anything like that, right? So what we do is we say, hey, we would like to provide a better product to your, to your employees, to your contractors, so on and so forth. And we have this, and this to offer in comparison at a reasonable price point that is at the federal per diem rate for housing or lower. Right. And so we're typically matching a price or lower, as an extended stay property. We're providing more amenities, a higher level product with a short term property, all the accoutrements and amenities of a home. And we're able to do it at scale. Right. And so that's how we bring value to them. That's how we kind of introduce ourselves. And then typically there's a light bulb moment that happens when people understand, what you're offering in comparison to what their people are accustomed to getting. And that's how the conversation develops. Right. And so part of it is finding out who the decision maker is, being able to trace that person down, open up the conversation by adding value, and then showing the difference in your unique selling proposition, right? Showing the difference in your product or service versus what they're accustomed to. And then at that point, it's just a matter of getting on their vendor list, perhaps, or getting on their list of available properties that their people can choose from. And so I have examples of both of those, but that's at a high level, that's typically what we would do.
Love that LinkedIn tracing. That's very tactical, which I appreciate. Hey, listen, you know how they say marketers ruin everything? I'm about to ruin it right now. Is there like some kind of, because I'm thinking I've used so many tools, like I believe there's a Chrome extension out there will scrape the numbers too, right?
Yes. So I'm glad you mentioned extensions, because here's one. Let me see if I can't open up my LinkedIn here. So here's one that we use. So it's called Crystal. Let me see what it's called.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yep.
It works in combination with LinkedIn, and it helps provide some what's the best way to describe it? Like personality profile type information, right? So that when you
have Crystal,
yeah, you already know that. You already know.
Marketing.
Yeah, so that's one of the tools that we use, because as you know, when you're reaching out to people, you're dealing with different personalities. You're dealing with different, different disc profiles, if you will. And so it's very helpful to know how that person typically likes to, get information, and how they typically communicate, their style of communication. And so, so we talk about leveraging tools like that. But yeah, absolutely love extensions, tools, anything you can do to make the job easier.
Yeah, we're using an outreach tool right now. It's pretty crazy. I'll give you guys a shout out, or just reach out to me if you're interested. But we're still testing it, so I don't want to just say it's basically a video outreach. You'll geek out on this. The API will say your name. Hi, Noble, right? Like, because I'll just have my mouth open, it will say your name, and then it'll go into the recorded video. I mean, we've been getting some calendars booked that way. For the agency.
That's super cool.
So it looks super personalized. It's like, it'll be like this. So I have to wave and I have to have my mouth open, and the API will say your name. Hi, Noble. I noticed you on LinkedIn, and then that'll be the created video. And people are like, oh, like, thank you so much. I love your personalized video. Yeah. Actually, it was just on the radio with a guy. He had a radio show. He's like, man, Ruben reached out to me. Like, let's get you on the radio, and then I might become a client. So we're testing it out, though. We're still running the campaign. Want to make sure that it's converting well before I roll it out to the people.
Awesome. I love it.
Experimentation. I always experiment. And the reason why is I'm always trying to find the best tool, the best method, and the best vehicle to help me get to my end goal. One of the tools that we use in the short-term rental space is Guesty for Hosts. Now, experimentation, you know that I love to test things, and I wouldn't be sharing with you anything that I don't use myself. As a short-term rental superhost, Airbnb superhost, listings that we own and co-host at the same time, I can tell you that there's no better software that allows us to streamline our business. Right now, currently, there's actually 3 properties right now that are currently where guests are checking in, and I'm here with you, and I did not need to send in check-in instructions for these current properties, right? There are multiple ways that you can streamline your operation, from on the front end and on the back end, from being able to create a website, from being able to get income reports for your team, to looking at statistics, to setting up auto reviews, to
integrating your smart lock so that you don't have to sit here and send every day and remind yourself to send the passcodes for your smart locks. No, instead you can integrate directly the exact same way that you can actually send your cleaners a link so that they don't have to remind themselves when they need to go to cleanings. There's text reminders that go out. There's links that can go out for them. This is a tool that if you're looking to give a smooth experience for your team on the back end, it will truly reflect, and it does, for your guests on the front end. Make sure you go to host.guesty.com and use our unique link. Our unique link will be in our bio, in the show notes. If you're currently watching this, you'll see it right here at the bottom of my screen. Use this unique link so that you can tell Guesty that I sent you. You don't want to miss out on this. You need a PMS, property management software, in your business if you're looking to operate like a super host that you deserve to be, so that your guests can have the best experience that they deserve to have at your properties. Again, that host.guesty.com. Use our unique link that is here on the screen, in the bio, and in the show notes if you're listening to this, guys. Happy hosting. But yeah, that's cool, man. So yeah, so here I am as a marketer, gonna ruin the game again. But this is good. This is good for you guys. This is really good for, I mean, this is amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you said, I listen very closely when I'm with a guy like you on this platform, because it's, it's how you say things, it's what you say, and these two keywords popped up that I definitely want to drill down. You said a better product, and you said a superior product, and you said that twice. And obviously you have multiple units now. You've come from I don't know if you mentioned this, you were in the hotel industry for like what, 15 years?
Wow. Yeah, I'm dating myself. Thank you.
I'm sorry, man. Because see, we know black don't crack. I don't want to put it out there, but
right.
Noble's been in the trenches, right? So this man, don't think, like I said, this is not his first rodeo. And so the reason that's really cool is because when you say a better product, you've seen both products. So why don't you give us a few insights as to, like, what might be a better product, or some bullet points that you feel would empower us to feel that we have a better product, or how we should put a better product as it relates to what they're used to getting, right? Like right now, it's very hotel-like, very similar. Like, what's a better product? How do you define that for you in your words?
Yeah, great question. So I think we'll start with things that stand out just immediately, right? And do kind of a compare and contrast. Sure. So, as we all know, in the traditional kind of hotel, motel, even extended stay properties. So some of your extended stay, properties, you don't get the same amenities that one would have naturally being at their own residence, their normal place of living. So, yeah. So one thing, like, as FTR operators, like, we're putting everything in the units, right? We're like literally everything, right? At least for most of us, I know we are, all the way down to, a whisk that's gonna, whisk the eggs or scrambled eggs or whatever, your dishwasher pods and things, all the way down to, just the minute details, blenders and things that you would normally have if you were living at your place of residence, right?
Even like laundry, right? Sometimes that's a challenge. Like,
yeah, that's huge, right? Yeah, absolutely. And so all of that stuff, us as SDR operators, we're putting those into the units, right? You're not going to find a hotel product, and I haven't, and I've been in the space for a long time. You're not going to find a hotel product that puts in the same level of amenities and items inside of a unit. Okay, you're just not. So that's a differentiator right there, right? So when we talk about as a short-term rental operator having all of the benefits of home, that's what we're talking about, right? Secondly, I would say space. Okay. So I'll probably jack this, this statistic up, but I think the average hotel room is under 500 square feet. And I want to say it's like in the high threes. like 392, somewhere around there, right? Something crazy small, right? So yes, a lot of us in the space, we leverage studios, right? But even still, the overwhelming number of properties in the short-term rental space are going to be larger than even a double hotel room, and a double, and sometimes a little bit larger than a single, right? And so so space in and of itself is a huge thing, right? Especially when you are comparing to what's a good example? So Marriott Residence Inns. So Marriott Residence Inns probably is going to be like the closest that you're going to come to anything remotely close to what we do, and it still pales in comparison, right? And considerably so, right? And so so that when I say a different product or service, it has to do a lot with what we as hosts provide for the guests that are staying at our properties.
I love that. You know, it's interesting because what I'm hearing you speak, and again, this is why I really appreciate having your kind of experience in here, is you're not speaking about passion or all that. You're talking about solving real problems, right? That's what entrepreneurship 101 is like. What problem are you solving? What are your pain points, and what can I offer? Right? Period. That's it. That's what business is about. If you love what you do, fantastic. If you don't love what you do and you're still solving a problem, that's business and people will pay. Right. So I love that. And funny enough, as you're speaking, like you're giving me reminders. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good point. And it's funny because one of the number one things we get in our reviews is the word spacious. And that's actually why we name our properties spacious, right? We literally include that in our copy because that's the language that they're using, right? So that's so interesting because when I asked you the question, I was like, oh, let me like this is interesting. Let's see where this goes. Amenities. Just talking about, we had Bill come on here, and that's what he preaches about. Like he's all about amenity stacking. Like get the fire extinguisher in there. Get anything, right? Get amenity stacking will trump everything, right? So I love that you went there. The space, the space is crazy. And then the little details, and it all goes back to, and I'm sure you have this in your copy. I'm thinking it's all about addressing that in the email because you know their pain points, you know the limitations of this one product, and you compare it against the other product, right? And you're saying, hey, this is what we can offer, and these are the things that we can overcome. So damn, that's good, man. Yeah. You're good at this. You've been doing this for a while. Damn. So let's talk about, I want to ask you about you mentioned this, right? That you can match a better rate, right? And I want to go there for a second because I know we were geeking out on this in one of Rachel's masterclass. She was talking about how just run the numbers for a relocation, right? And you actually try to do it. Like, oh, we have a family of 5, we have 2 dogs. Try to put that in like a Marriott for 30 days or whatever the case might be. Then get your number and then like compare it and be like, you're actually getting a good deal, even for, right? And this was on the midterm rental side. I'm very curious as to how you guys, run your numbers. Is it kind of, all right, it's just a price labs thing, or it's kind of like, no, we're going to go to what you would typically go in the marketplace. We're going to compare ourselves to Hilton. We're going to compare ourselves to Marriott. We're going to actually look and enter the dates. And then we're going to come up with a number and we're going to match that and do better. And then we're going to call out all the good things that you're not getting at those places if you stay with us. Like, again, I just thought that's where my mind goes. I might be completely off. How do you guys do your comparative market analysis for your pricing? Because you said that was a big thing. We can either match the price or make it lower. How are you finding out that number?
Yeah, so great question. So that depends on a number of different things, right? So, we play in a number of different verticals. Kind of the example I was referring to was on the government space. So let me give a little bit of context in that. So in the government space, a couple of things to note. The government has what's called a GSA per diem rate. Okay, Government Services Administration. It's a lodging per diem rate. It's a nightly rate that they'll pay. Okay.
One more time.
Point.
Government
Services Administration. So GSA. And so there's a GSA lodging per diem rate. That's the nightly rate, the maximum nightly rate that they'll pay. Okay.
Where can I find that?
You can Google GSA per diem. You'll have to put in your city or zip code or whatever, and then it'll tell you what that rate is, that nightly rate. Okay. So what I can tell you is like here in Dallas Fort Worth, that nightly rate is $167 a night. Okay.
No
So
kidding.
yeah, so I'm gonna give you an example, kind of like a case study, if you will, just to give it some context, right? And so that nightly rate is $167 a night. Now that rate applies to federal employees or contractors, military. That's at that government level. That's the rate in the Dallas Fort Worth area that they'll pay on a nightly basis. That's the cap, right? At 167. Okay, so. And one of the things that we teach is talking about, and we'll get into a little bit of government contracting here because I think this is a good.
And I'm going to pull this
segue.
up if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
is something I started doing recently. So would this be right? Like what I did, Georgia per diem rates?
So let me see. I don't know how you got to federalpay.com .org, but typically it would take you to the GSA site, which is going to be gsa.gov. Okay. So if you did a Google search, look for the gsa.gov. Yeah, that one. That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. And so you can see there so let's take Atlanta for example. You can see, and that rate is pretty static. It looks like across the board, right? So ours is 167, that's 163. So perfect example. So that's the rate that the government will pay on a nightly basis. Okay. Now here's the beautiful thing. Now the government, conversely, they will not pay for quote unquote Airbnb properties. Okay. So this is again the B2B direct. Okay. They will not pay for them, nor will they reimburse federal employees or military members who stay in Airbnbs. The government is like, they don't really understand the STR space traditionally. And they certainly, won't cover an Airbnb, quote unquote, Airbnb property. Right. And so, so this is a direct book strategy that requires you to have a direct booking website. So let me lead with that. Okay. So you have your government, your GSA rate. Okay. So here's what we did. So we identified a company that was holding a government contract, right? It's a big defense contractor. Here in the Dallas Fort Worth area, they're holding a big, hundreds and hundreds of million defense contract with the government. It's a long-term contract. Now, so what they do in this particular one is they are training and recertifying pilots and mechanics. That's what they do year in and year out. Okay. And so these pilots and mechanics will fly to this location, and these are helicopter pilots and mechanics. So they'll fly to this location to do their training and their recertification. Now the mechanics will come in 2-week intervals, and the pilots will come in 1 month intervals. Okay. And so what we did was, again, using LinkedIn trace and some of the things I talked about, we were able to get to the decision maker, and we found out that they're traditionally all these people that are coming in are staying in nearby hotel properties, right? And so we went to them and said, hey, this is a product or service we provide. How can we get on that list, right, of those hotels and motels that you're making available to them for those people to come and stay at, right? And so once we were able to navigate that, we had, this is a 9-door deal. Okay. And so here's how it works. So we have 5 1-bedrooms. Okay. Now those 5 1-bedrooms, rent was about $1,500 a month. Okay. On the 1-bedrooms. Now what we're doing is we're putting the pilots, because they're coming in 30-day increments, we're putting them in the 1-bedrooms. Okay. So we'll have 1 pilot per 1-bedroom in 30-day intervals, like on consistently month after month. Right. Okay. Now what we're charging them is the GSA per diem rate of $167 a night. Well, if you do the math, $167 a night times 30 nights is $5,010 a month. Okay. Our rent is $1,500 plus a couple $100 in expenses. Okay.
And for context, that's when you say rent, this is an arbitrage, right?
Yeah,
so
it's an arbitrage.
You guys have an overhead.
Yes, this is an arbitrage play. Yep.
And you're able to make 5,000, so you're getting that spread.
Yeah, so we're getting that spread times those 5 doors. Now, watch this. This is where it gets beautiful. So there's 4 2-bedrooms. Now, here's what we're doing: 2-bedrooms. The mechanics are coming in at 2-week intervals, so they're there less time. So we're putting them in the 2-bedrooms. So we're putting a mechanic in each bedroom. But the rate is not for the 2-bedroom unit. The rate is for per door. So we're going 167 a night times 30 nights times 2.
Oh my gosh! Stop!
Yeah.
Quit playing.
No.
Oh my god!
Yeah, so if you do the math, those 9 units gross $65,000 a month in revenue.
This is why you look so young. because everything's good, baby. It's a gravy over there.
So that's a 9-unit deal. We have 42 doors. Only 3 of them are left on the OTAs. Everything else is direct. So do the math. So it is. So the government space is extremely lucrative now, and this is a 6-year contract that this company has, and we're in year 3. Still got 3 more years to go.
Jeez.
Yeah, this is year round, 100% occupancy. You know, not Christmas and Thanksgiving, but outside that, 100% occupancy year round.
So that per diem, is there? Do you make sure that you're not like exceeding it with taxes and cleaning fees? Does it need to be, or is that just for that day, and then you also additionally have like your taxes? I'm just curious. Maybe a small tactical question. I'm just out of curiosity.
Yeah. No. Great question. So there's certain things when you're dealing with federal government, there's things that you can do and there's things that you can't do, and there's certain requirements that are a little bit different, right? So one of those is and I'm gonna get to answer your question in a second, but one of those is in relation to the cancellation, right? So you have to be able to offer same day cancellation. So it's not like an Airbnb where that's just a requirement that they have. Now, because this is a training type of deal, we're just not dealing with that, right? But just
they're coming in for work.
Yeah,
but they want that flexibility for whatever reason. I mean, it's the government, I guess, right?
Well, yeah. So that's a requirement where you can't offer anything other than this same day cancellation. You can't exceed that GSA rate. You have to be FEMA certified. Okay. So, So any hotels automatically carry the certification, just going through the process of being built and developed, right? But there's a FEMA certification requirement that the government has in place. Now, people think of FEMA, they think of disaster management, right? Yeah. But that's not the certification that I'm referring to. So FEMA has a certification that requires you to have your safety systems in place. So your fire detection system, your carbon detection, sprinkler, whatever the case is, right? So you have to pass that. Right.
Are they sending someone on site, or is this an continuing education? Like, what is that? Excellent.
Man, you're a professional podcaster. You ask all the good questions. So so a combination of they can and will send someone on site. And they don't do that in every instance, but they do that, I'm working with a student where, he actually had someone scheduled to come on site and look at his properties. Okay. And so, that's not in every case. And it really kind of changed during COVID because of COVID, where they stopped doing the on-sites, and they've picked it back up since then, but they don't do 100% on-site business. But you have to be prepared for them to actually come on site. And in the cases where they're not, you're providing photo evidence and stuff like that and filling out documentation for that. So good question.
Wow, that's right. Well, and for you're doing that at your LLC level, or someone on your team? It has to be an individual, like operations manager. Who has that FEMA? Is that based on the entity?
Yeah, so it's based on the entity and the address. Okay, so if you're in a multifamily that is already FEMA certified, because that can be a thing, then you're good, right? But if it's not, and you need to you need to have it certified to do business at that level, and it's not that hard. It's an online form that you fill out. Yeah, it's really simple. Now, here's the irony in that. When I told you that the federal government doesn't reimburse for Airbnb, you can actually FEMA certify an Airbnb, but that gets to the disaster recovery side, right?
Yeah, so that benefits the
hurricane people, like in Florida. Yeah. So if your Airbnb is on that FEMA list, then FEMA can direct funds your way to house displaced homeowners. Yeah,
that's key. It's actually funny. We had a lady in one of our properties come from Orlando, just for that reason, but I didn't even know that was a thing. So and last thing real quick, you said you have 40 something doors. The FEMA certification is, if I'm assuming you have them, and maybe you do or maybe you don't, or maybe it's one because you're doing arbitrage, maybe it's one LLC, but is it a per door or per property certification, or is it a per entity certification? Sorry, I just want to clear that up.
Yeah, no, good question. So it can be one of the other of those two. So for example, a building owner can get the entire building certified. Okay.
Which would factor in all the units would be covered under that.
Right. Example. And so like one of my students, like she controls an entire 30 something unit building. So, but she's not the owner. but she has a master lease on the building. And so that entire building could be certified. Conversely, if you're in like a multifamily complex and you have like a number of units there, you can get those individual units certified.
But if you have a duplex outside of that building, you would have to also get that duplex FEMA certified.
Yes, you can get the duplex FEMA certified too. So we primarily what we have is our arbitrage, the majority of our doors. But we also have some owned assets too, like that, right? So the duplexes and things like that. So yes, you can get those certified as well.
That's cool, man. So, gosh, I could geek out with you all day. You're a wealth of knowledge, my friend. My goodness. So, you mentioned the type of product. You have arbitrage and you have some owned. So you're applying this model. Which one do you think is the one that? I mean, this one sounds government contract sounds like very lucrative. Which one is your favorite, man? If you were to pick one, I mean, it's hard. It's kind of like your babies, but is there a vertical that you feel is really good, or one that looks good but is not as good? Like what actually, that's maybe the question where I want to go is like, what's one that you feel is like, Ruben, here's why I love it, and then what's one where you feel, hey, most people go for that one, but it's not, flowers and rainbows. It's not all what it seems to be. Is there something that comes to mind when you think about these verticals?
Absolutely. 1000%. So my favorite is the government vertical. For every reason I just explained, right?
Yeah,
because it's the most lucrative. The cadence of turns is much slower, right? And so we're not dealing with sending housekeepers in every weekend. We're not dealing with problem guests. The business model of direct B2B space is a very blue ocean strategy, right? So you're not competing for the same transit guests that typical Airbnb hosts are competing for. We're just not playing in that space. We're not worried about regulations and ordinances that these cities are implementing left and right? Because we're just not playing in that space, right? And so we're not worrying about the traditional marketing that people are trying to do, extra marketing on Facebook or Google or different things like that to try to get, guests into their units. And so it's a very blue ocean kind of business model. And so, but of all of those, the verticals that we mentioned, the government one is the two-edged sword. It's the most lucrative, the most least time consuming, that you have systems set up in place. It kind of just runs itself on autopilot. However, it's also the most difficult to get into, right? And
barriers of entry.
Yeah. So there's a process of getting your entity positioned to do business with the federal government, right? And that process starts with, making sure your entity is registered as a vendor at the federal level. So it's going through the sam.gov registration process and getting your entity set up to do business with the federal government, because you have to be in their vendor database essentially. To take advantage of these opportunities, right? And so that's a process, right? I'll give your listeners a quick tip, because going through that process on your own, going through that sam.gov registration process, I've seen people try to tackle that themselves. It could be anything dealing with the government, right? It could be cumbersome, red tape, lengthy, frustrating, whatever. It's no different there. But there's a resource. It's called a PTAC, PTAC. Right? Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. Okay. So PTAC advisors are representatives that provide free guidance and support to help you get through that sam.gov registration process exponentially faster. Right. And with all the hurdles and headaches. So they provide, you can just Google PTAC, drop in your city because they have offices by location and region. And you can leverage a PTAC advisor because that's their sole job, is to help your entity get in position to do business with the federal government, both local, state, and nationally. Okay. And so the federal vertical is the most strenuous to get into. But here's what I always advise my students: start there, because it's a process you only have to go through one time. And once you go through it and you're in a position to acquire some of that business, it's like the gift that just keeps on giving, right? Just like that example I gave you earlier, and I could give you a couple of those because that's just one of them, right? But it's the gift that keeps on giving month in and month out. And so just go through the process once, because not only does it do that, but it's also a good tool to use, if you will, to try to get into other verticals, because it carries a certain amount of significance and weight when you can show that your entity is already positioned to do business at the highest level, the federal government. right? And for people that don't know, the U.S. government has the single largest accounts payable department in the world, right?
Wait,
The single
what?
largest accounts payable in the world is the U.S. government, right? And so much of that money going out is going out via contracts to small businesses, right? Billions and billions and billions of dollars a year. Okay. Yeah. And so when you can show that you're registered to do business at the federal level, right, you can leverage that when you're going to talk to some of these other verticals, right? And so that's my favorite for all those reasons, but it's also the most time consuming to get into and to kind of get up and running on, right? I also like the military. We didn't talk about that, but that's probably, another one that I like quite a bit.
Yeah, and a whole nother show in itself. And just real quick, I'll ask, who's the point of contact for the military? Because we talk about corporate housing for schools, we talk about med schools, for medical schools, for who's that point of contact for military?
Yep, great question. So at the military, you're going to have these MHOs. It's called a military housing office. Okay, military housing office is who kind of dictates the on-base housing, right? But the government created a program called the Rental Partnership Program. Okay, the Rental Partnership Program is what allows private homeowners and operators like ourselves to offer off-base housing to military service members. Okay. Now here's the trick. I'll give you one last tip. So if that's something you're interested in, you need to get a hold of the officer over the MHO, the Military Housing Office. Mention the Rental Partnership Program that you're interested in participating in that. But the key is to be able to understand like what type of military service member is the best fit for my property. So for us, and some of the properties that are more on the higher end, right? Well, we know that there's what's called a BAH, a basic allowance for housing. So service members get a housing per diem based on rank, right? And so we know that lower ranked service members like, privates, corporals, things like that, they won't qualify. They have to stay on base. But once you get up to like E3 and up, right, your sergeants, your staff sergeant, master sergeants and up, they qualify for a higher housing allowance. But here's the kicker right here. So officers have the single highest housing allowance, right? And so when you are keying on officers, that's where the money starts to come in. Not only officers, but if they're officers and they have a family, they have dependents, that's even more, right? And so that's for if you have a property that you need to capture the maximum amount for, that's where you want to target. So,
man, you're like a walking STR machine. Listen, man, I didn't even get a chance to talk to you what I geek out on the most, and I want to be respectful for your time. You said it a few times. You said processes, systems. I know you're a big systems guy too. I mean, that's the only way you've been able to be the serial entrepreneur that you are and have success. So real quick, if you're gonna give us kind of a, hey, if I'm gonna focus on the structure, because we talked a lot about the outcome, we talked a lot about the resources, which I think is going to help so many people. So thank you for that, and I would definitely want them to tap into some of your coaching and everything that you offer and the education that you offer, because I mean, you heard it from here, the horse's mouth, man. He knows what he's talking about, right? So and I'm a big believer tapping into people you trade places with. I trade places with you any day, brother. So we'll definitely include that in the show notes shortly. But before you go, real quick, when you talk about building a team, systems and processes, if I'm looking at 1,000 foot or 3,000 foot level view of your business, could you quickly tell us real quick does that look like? I've heard you talk about it. You have community managers like that train other people. Like real quick, what does the org structure look like for you?
Gotcha. Great question. So you hit on it, right? So 3 things that are absolutely key and essential in this space, right? People, processes, and systems. Okay. If you get those 3 things dialed in, boom, you're off to the races, right? And then if your goal is similar to mine, right, which is to work less, in the business directly and work more so on the business and at a higher level, doing things that are the best use of my time, that it's important to get those things dialed in. And so from a people perspective and an org structure perspective, when we started like most folks, right? So we started rental arbitrage, we started with the OTAs, namely Airbnb. We identified a cleaner first, right? So fast forward to kind of the structure and way it's set up now. So we have, so there's myself and my wife. I'm primarily at this point kind of sales and business development and things like that, and handle kind of the education side. And my wife is over operations and stuff like that, right? So
what's your wife's name?
Her name is Elkie, Elkie.
Shout out to Elkie, man. She's, she couldn't be here with us, but big shout out. That's beautiful when you're aligned with your partner. That's awesome. Elkie.
Yeah, absolutely. So she's the better half of the business, if you will, right? And so operationally, we have what are called community managers. So some people that have been in space in a while refer to them as runners. Well, runners do a number of different things for you, right? But for us specifically, our community managers now to this point are trained up to train others. Okay. And so the community managers oversee, like, for example, a housekeeping team and the cleaning team, right? So not only do they have the ability to hire new housekeepers and cleaners and things like that, but they also have the ability to train them, right? But then we also do quality control checks, right? So we'll do random spot checks on our cleaning teams. Either they're in the middle of a clean or at the conclusion of a clean or whatever. And those are infrequent. They never know when our community manager is going to perform those. And that's to maintain the quality level, right?
Love that. Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the community manager also, they handle like inventory, ordering product. They handle the linen and laundry management. And so we outsource that right through a third party, wash and fold service. And so they handle the exchange of the whole 9 yards with the laundry.
Paying, are they also paying them?
So the only thing that we don't typically outsource is the financials. I keep that in-house.
That's good to know. That's good to know, by the way, because that's how I'm doing it right now. It'd be interesting. I'm doing that both on the marketing side and agency and the STR, but I'd be curious to see a CFO or something. I'm definitely not there yet. But it'd be interesting. But it's important to be close to the numbers, right? That's the key takeaway. Absolutely. And so out of the maybe 5 hours I work a week, that's part of it, just seeing it, kind of tracking that. So they handle the cleaners, and then there's the VA team. And the community manager now at this point kind of oversee our VA structure. So we have the VAs that are available around the clock, because we also not only, obviously handle the guest messaging through the software and online, but we take live calls too. Right. And so for that reason, we have around the clock service. We got like a Ring Central situation set up, or
close. So we use Dialpad for ours. We use Dialpad, which I think is very similar to Ring Central in terms of feature set, but gives us the ability to record calls. Right.
Ooh, quality.
Exactly. And so they can go back and do coaching too on that. And so the structure that's kind of the structure at a high level, and we can get into this on another time, but our community managers get paid a percentage of every stay. Okay, that's how we compensate them. So they're not on salary. They're 1099s, but they get paid well because they get a piece of every stay.
And you're basically want them to have what's the word? Stake, not stake.
Like ownership.
Like ownership. Yeah. That's fun. I know that's Julie kind of. She was the one who planted that seed in you to make your manager almost like their own business owner, so they feel incentivized. That's cool. We're gonna geek out about that some other time, man, because that's cool though. That I love that structure, and I'm really glad to hear about the financials. That's really cool. The VAs, that's a beautiful structure, man. That's really cool, man. That you've been able to build that. And I'm a systems guy, so I didn't want to let you slip out here without giving us these gems on that org structure. But golly, Noble, what is next for you, brother? You're by the way, I mean, I don't know if you guys haven't checked out Noble. I mean, you're really out there in the space. You're a great speaker. You're a great educator.
Thank you.
I've heard a lot of your content. I've seen you speak on stage, not in person, virtually. I couldn't come to STR the summit when I was actually we just got married. We were getting married.
Congrats.
Yeah, man. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But anyways, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person very soon, brother. But for those of us who can't meet you in person quite yet, and we want to tap into what you have to offer. You gave us just so many different avenues we could go down into, which I love. Where would you say is where we can get in touch with you, or get in touch with you, what you have to offer as program services or coaching?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, easiest way to get in touch with me is through Instagram.
Easiest
You,
way. I've been chasing you for 15 months. What are you talking about? Tell the people the truth. I'm just kidding, guys.
so,
We could make the schedules work, but I'm so happy you're here today, brother. Instagram. What is your
yeah.
Instagram, Noble?
Yes, sir. So Noble Noble dot Crawford Crawford dot the number 3. So Noble dot Crawford dot 3.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You're third generation. Is that the third?
I am. I'm the third. My oldest is
Wow.
the fourth. Yeah, it's getting out of hand.
Oh wow. I don't know. I wonder if I'll do that. I don't have kids yet, but I don't know if I'm gonna do Ruben the second. Maybe
There
I
you
don't
go.
know if my wife will approve that, but or Rubina. That's actually my it's a kind of crazy thing. My wife's grandmother's name Rubina,
Ah,
and my grandma's name is Marceline, and my wife's name is Celine. It's kind of crazy.
that's
It's just
cool.
some weird things going on in the family. But they have the same birthdays with my sister. Like it's kind of like fate, man. It was meant to be. That's why I had to put a ring on it, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Um, but man, listen, I'm rooting for you, brother. I always like to say this. I usually say it offline, but is there anything we could do for you? Experimentation's got your back. You've given us more than enough. You over delivered. We're even 6 minutes over, and you're still here standing. So, with that said, we'll make sure to check you out on Instagram. I'm definitely make sure I'll tag you on there as well. We'll include everything in the show notes. And is there anything else you want to leave experimentation, brother, with all that you gave us today? Is there any last words that you want to leave us?
Man, I would just first of all, and thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
I've absolutely enjoyed it. But I would just, let everyone know that, you have to focus, right? And so I dropped a lot of information about a lot of different verticals, but at the end of the day, don't try to attack everything and it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like pick one or two that you want to go after and focus and master those and become, extremely dialed in those verticals, because that's really where the true benefit lies. So focus, 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 and man, I'll see y'all at the top.
That's a fact. We'll be right up there with you. Thank you so much, Noble. And just like that, we are out.